Mm. Okay. Good morning, everyone. This is Sahar, and you're watching Rethink with Sahar. This is a platform where we rethink our life, our ideas, our notions, and we make a new beginning. So, you're welcome. And today we have with us RC Gray. Hi, RC. How are you
Hi.
doing?
Great. Thanks. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. I'm doing great as well. So, RC, you are on your website, rcgray.com, yeah, if I'm not wrong, right?
That's correct. Yep.
That's correct. Okay. So, there you write that you faced a lot of traumas
Yes.
and you overcame them
Yeah.
to be what you are today.
Yeah.
How was the journey?
Wow. Journey. Yes, definitely. It was a journey. So one of the things that I've said from through my experience, which I'll talk about in a moment, but is that everybody says that healing is a journey, and it's true. It is a journey. I like to think of it as a journey of 1,000 destinations,
Oh,
and
yes.
it's this idea that as we go on the journey, we have to stop and celebrate our steps. So we have to stop and celebrate our milestones and the destinations along the way. So um, once I had that awareness, I would say the journey became fun. But
Hmm.
my experience until I had that awareness and until I took the time to do that, my journey was difficult. And I think a lot of other people can say the same thing about their healing journey or their experience with trauma, is that
Hmm.
everything feels like the hardest thing ever.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
yeah, and mine started in childhood before I even understood that I was experiencing trauma, right? So,
Mm.
yeah, the journey can be difficult, and I encourage people to embrace that and to look at it by celebrating their successes, celebrating every
Yeah.
time they feel like they've had a little milestone, right?
Yes. That's right. And would you like to talk a little bit about what you experienced in your childhood and then in your young youth?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it started when I was about 4 years old. At
Um,
least that's the earliest memory I have of
mm-hmm.
the experience. I was sexually abused
Oh,
by two different people. It started with one, and then that person then groomed a second person
wow.
to abuse me, and that
That's
went
so
on.
sad.
Thank you. And I didn't know at 4 years old. You don't know the difference. You don't really know.
Of course.
These are people in your life that you trust, and that's just your life experience. You don't know any different. And this went on until I was about 13 years old, and
Um,
it had been it was discovered by other adults happening, and unfortunately I wasn't supported by the other adults.
oh
Unfortunately,
my
those
God.
adults looked at it from a perspective of, this is shameful, we don't talk about this, what you did was
Yes.
bad. And so there was a lot of blame and shame placed on myself, as the victim, right? And again, I
Mm-hmm.
carried that. I was still a child at 13 years old, and while I
Of
had an
course.
awareness that it was wrong, I
Mm-hmm.
trusted that people would help me, and I didn't get that support that I needed. And I was essentially just taught to ignore it, pretend it didn't happen, and move on with life. And I tried for a very long time. I was a very ambitious person. When I was 9 years old, I wrote a children's book and by hand and illustrated, and I sent it off to a publisher, and I got my first rejection letter ever. And so, like, I always had
Beautiful.
these big ambitious goals. I always wanted to do big things, but I would just constantly fall flat on my face. In high school, same thing. I went out for sports that I had no business playing. I wrestled in high school as a girl. I was always like challenging the status quo and always trying to do something bigger than myself. And I believe that these ambitions, they were true, and I believed that I had every right to be that person, and yet I couldn't figure out why I couldn't succeed at all of these big things I tried. And I was just constantly, it felt like this invisible barrier, like I was just running into this glass wall that I just couldn't see.
Wow.
And then I went off to college, and the same things were happening. And I took on big projects, and I started businesses in college, and I would just fall flat on my face. And
Mhm.
I struggled a lot. And this went on for many, many years. I eventually realized that a good portion of my struggles had to do with the fact that, I was abused as a child. My body was in survival mode, constantly on high alert. I wasn't able to focus, my executive functions. Um, you know,
Exactly.
yeah, I couldn't be on time. I couldn't focus. I couldn't um, complete tasks. I was really bad at making relationships and holding relationships.
Yeah,
I do really well in a job interview, and then 3 weeks later in the job, I'd just be completely failing, right? And I
that's right.
thought there was something wrong with me, and I didn't know what
Yeah.
was going on. This continued well into my 30s, where I had in my 20s and 30s a series of bad relationships. I was
Oh.
picking the wrong men, right? Like choosing the wrong guys. Um, and most of them were either very childish, or they were emotionally abusive or neglectful,
Mhm.
or controlling. And then my 30s, when I was 37 years old, I met, well, I think I was 35 when I met him. I met a person, we dated for about a year and a half, and I realized that
Mhm.
there was a lot of toxicity. I wanted something different in my life. So I broke it off with him. I was still trying to get my life together. I had gotten another degree and gotten my real estate license, and I was practicing as an architect, and
Always running
I was doing this.
nowhere.
I was finally having this big business. I was finally like being an adult, and I felt like I had made it. And
Mhm.
I was dating this person. I realized that there were a lot of issues, a lot of toxicity in the relationship. So I broke up with him. And for the next year and a half, he continued to find ways to be in my life.
Wow.
And there was a constant push and pull. It was what I now know is called the cycle of abuse. But all of this was happening, and it was this pulling me into his life and then rejecting me, and then pulling me into his life and rejecting me. And so after about another year and a half after we broke up of this happening, the situation escalated, and he actually ended up kidnapping me. He held me captive for 4 days.
Ooh.
Yes. He over those course of the 4 days, I was tortured, I was beaten, I was raped multiple times, and he ultimately tried to kill me. He tried to murder me. I don't know if we can say that. I know we're live, and I hope that we're not going to have any censorship issues. But
Well,
he did try to. He attempted to take my life with a knife to my throat, and I narrowly escaped. And that was this realization I had that all of my life, my entire life story, starting at 4 years old, had groomed me to tolerate bad behavior, to have no boundaries, to have no self-worth, that if I asked for help, I wouldn't get it, that I was on my own. And all through life, all of my failures, I took all of that shame with me. I took all of that, lack of self-worth with me and everything that I was doing. And it was inviting the wrong people into my life. I was putting myself into situations like this. I couldn't
mhm.
see the danger.
Yep.
And when you almost die, when you come to a place where you really believe, and I really did believe in that moment, as a knife went into my throat, this was it, and I wasn't going to
Mhm.
make it. Um, a lot of thoughts go through your head, and
Yeah.
as I've survived that, I've so much gratitude for my experiences. And I know that's really, really hard to say, especially to someone else who may have experienced trauma. But I have so much gratitude
Mhm.
because it really did shift my perspective. And I got to a point where I realized, if this continues, the cycle continues, I'm not going to survive the next time. So
Yeah.
to explain my journey, it had to get really, really bad before I was able to open my eyes and finally do the right things for myself, and to heal from everything that happened in my childhood. So yeah, that's there you go.
So I realize that, and the way you are saying it with a smile,
Oh
a
yeah.
giggle, that's the most important thing. People are not able to even smile.
That's 100% true. I think that um, people who are when you're in it, when you're experiencing the thoughts and the feelings and the weight of trauma, no, it's not fun. It doesn't feel
It's
good.
not.
Part of what we do, so as a result of my whole life experience here, I made a massive shift in my life. I really went deep in my healing journey, and I learned a lot about what healing really is and what trauma really is. And it's very interesting when I took that deep dive and I made this very interesting perspective shift on what trauma really is. All of a
Hmm.
sudden, healing became really fun. And I know that trauma and fun are not supposed to belong in the same sentence. I know that. But
No, they do. They do.
it
Because the more traumatic we feel outside, we face the world with a bigger smile. We want to hide it.
right, that's true. That some of it, right. A lot of times you're right. We put on this face and this facade that it's,
Yeah.
that we're trying to show the world that we're okay. When you're
Yes.
healing, you're releasing. It's like you're pulling back like these curtains, or you're releasing parts of yourself as you heal. And as you release those parts of yourself, there's those they're happy parts. They're good things in there. And it
Yeah.
does light you up. It does. Like, I can sit here and say all of this with a smile because I'm so grateful for every experience that I had, because now I'm able to look at it and say, wow, like, what did I learn from every single one of those experiences? And how am I a better person for it? What do I have control over? And then the best part, and I promise anyone who's on this healing journey right now, the best part is when you take all of those things you've learned and you give them to the next person. And that is what brings a smile to my
Yes.
face every single day. And that's when you know that, like I said, it's a destination in your healing journey. So I think that you when you talk about, there's two different smiles we put on with trauma. One is to hide from the world, right? To hide ourselves
Yes.
from the world. And the other one is to show the world, like, hey, this is me inside. Like, I peeled back the layers of all of
Yes.
that trauma, and now you get to see me, the real me. Yeah.
Exactly. And Arci, when as a child you were abused,
Mhm.
I know it's a difficult thing to recall, but when I don't know if I should be asking
You
you,
can
but
ask me absolutely anything, absolutely an
okay.
open book, because people who are experiencing trauma have all of these questions. And when we're afraid to ask them, it just adds more shame to the trauma. So ask
Mhm.
the questions. I want everyone to have these answers.
What was it like as a child?
Yeah,
Because you are not even aware of your own body,
correct.
and what about others? Not at all,
Right, right.
right? So when it happened for the first time, what was your state of mind?
At the time, it was compliance. The
Okay.
person who was doing this to me was, they obviously older than me, and
Yeah.
this is a person that I looked to as an authority figure, as someone who would care for me, who had some sense of responsibility. It wasn't a parent, but who had
Hmm.
some sense of responsibility, and I believed them to be. Um, uh, Part of my survival unit, right? We when we're small children, we rely on others for survival.
Exactly.
So this was, for me, from what I remember of the experience, it was compliance. It was foreign to me. It was new to me. It was definitely nothing I had ever experienced before. And as a child, anytime you're doing something new, going swimming for the first time, or learning to roller
Mhm.
skate or something like that, it's new, and we have apprehension about those things.
Exactly.
But I do distinctly remember just following instructions. Um,
Okay.
Very much it was pure confusion for me. And then I just I trusted this person. So, now in hindsight, I can look back and see all the signs. But when you're a
Yeah.
child, you can't.
Got you.
Yeah.
And when did the shame part come in?
So when I was maybe very early, I probably 5 or 6 years old,
Hmm.
was the first time that a parent actually discovered what was happening.
Okay.
And that shame was the shame component was that parent pulled me aside after witnessing an incident and pulled me aside. I still remember it. I was sitting at the end of my parents' bed, And
Mhm.
I was told, what you're doing is the exact words. What you're doing is a bad thing. We don't do that. And
Oh,
and that landed on me, and that was their way of trying to explain to me that the situation was not okay and that I was supposed to be saying no. But that's definitely not the words that were used. It
of
was
course.
used.
And it seems like that you were being blamed for what was happening.
And when you're 4 years old, if you knock over a glass and you break it, there's a difference between, hey, that was an accident. It's okay. Go
Yeah.
fix it. We don't do that. Like, maybe that's why we don't play baseball in the house,
Yes.
right? Versus you did the bad thing. Go clean it up. And
Exactly.
and that was, the response from the parent, like I said, was I think they also were experiencing shame, and that's not
Yes.
excusing their behavior as a parent, but at the same time, I think they didn't know what they were doing. Um, and they had never experienced this situation, and they made a choice, and unfortunately it was the wrong one, right,
Yes.
in how they
Yeah.
approached it. And I
Hmm.
think it stems a lot from their own shame and their own idea that we need to
And
suppress this and not talk about it.
it came out of a shock, and they were not really able to um, this thing realize it what was happening, and they were not able to settle it down in their minds.
Yeah, that's
So
exactly it. I think it was
yeah.
they felt an obligation to address
Yeah.
the situation. They were not equipped. They weren't trauma informed, and that's a term that we have now. This is 40 years ago that this was
Uh,
happening. That term, trauma informed, was just not commonplace. It wasn't something that a parent would necessarily have awareness of. And again, not
yes.
an excuse, right? But definitely an awareness that those things were missing. And as a result, for 30 something years of my life, I carried that shame with me in every single thing I did.
That's
Not just,
terrible.
yeah,
That's terrible. You feel you are not enough.
yeah.
That feeling is killing. You know?
Absolutely. Which is why I
And
think I constantly was chasing these huge, ambitious goals. I think I was chasing these huge things because I probably was trying to prove to my family, to the world, that I was enough, that I was good
you
enough.
were enough, or you were bigger than what you thought you were.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
okay, you write on your website.
Mhm.
Finally, you said, I F it off. So,
Yep. That was exactly, this shame that we're talking about, and the weight of trauma, and this weight of I'm not good enough and I'll never be enough, and this trying to prove to the world that I'm capable, right? Um,
mhm.
I finally did get to a place where I was like, F it, like F trauma.
Yeah,
Like, why does trauma need to continue to consume my life? And
exactly.
why do I need to keep giving it all this power? Why don't I just go do the thing that I want to do?
Hmm.
I just go do that thing, and I just pretend. Let's just pretend for a minute, right? And this isn't delusion. This is not being delusional and
Hmm.
brushing it under the rug. Let's just say to myself, okay, if I didn't have trauma, if I didn't have this trauma, what would I be doing with my life? Okay, well, I'm just
That's a
going to go
big
do that
question.
anyway. It's very freeing. And what it does is it shifts your energy and attention to the outcome you want. So you stop paying attention to how you feel every moment, and the weight of everything, and the thoughts that are in your head. And you stop listening to that voice that tells you you're not enough. And you stop
Mhm.
listening to that shame repeat of, any list of things. And we all talk to ourselves in horrible ways. We all have things to say about ourselves that are not nice. And you stop
Yeah.
listening to those things. And you just start saying, okay, well, if I want to start this business, what do I have to do? I'm going to go through those steps. There will be hurdles. When you have trauma, you feel differently and you experience things differently than the rest of the world. But I don't give any weight to that. I just say, okay, this is where I'm at. This is the hurdle that I have to overcome. What tools do I have to overcome that. Is it going to be easier for the next girl who maybe has never experienced trauma? Yes. Guess what? Not my problem, not my concern. I'm not going to concern myself with that. I'm going to say, where am I at right now? What hurdle do I have to overcome? I'm focused on what I want. I don't spend a lot of time worrying about how I feel. I just choose what I want. I choose the things that feel good, and I just do more of them. And I know that sounds really simple, and
It's not that simple.
it's not that simple. And it probably sounds very annoying to people who are experiencing the heavy weight of things and the thoughts and the feelings.
That's right.
But there's a secret to that. I do have a little secret. So, yeah. So we experience the world through our thoughts and our feelings, right? The things we think, the things we feel. That's how we as human beings experience the world. Trauma doesn't work that way. Trauma is not, and this is where there's a lot to unpack with this, but very simply put, trauma is not psychological. In other words, trauma is not the thoughts and the feelings that we're having, even though that is our world experience. That's our experience in life, our thoughts and our feelings. Trauma is actually something neurological. It's going on in your brain. And when we experience anything that we don't have the resources to handle at the time, this could be physical, emotional, psychological, sexual, right? Doesn't matter. Any experience that we don't have the resources for, our brain flips a little switch, puts us into what everyone knows as survival mode, right? And it uses to keep you safe and alive. Now, I'm writing a book on this actually.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So there's 3 rules that trauma follows. There's 3 rules that your brain follows, and trauma has to fall into these 3 rules. Rule number 1 is no dying. Your brain is always going to choose to keep you safe, no matter what.
Yes.
Rule number 2 is no crying. And what that means is only after your brain realizes that you are safe and alive and your situation, there's safety and security in situation, then, only then, can it start to worry about how you think and you feel. And the biggest mistake that people make is, because we experience the world through our thoughts and our feelings, when our thoughts are bad and mean to us, and when our feelings are not good, we think that we need to fix our thoughts and we need to fix our feelings. We don't. Those are
something deep within. It's the body itself.
The body itself.
Neurologically.
Exactly. So if you are able to go into your body and turn off survival mode, and there's a lot of ways to do this. People talk a lot about somatic healing. I use applied neuroscience, polyvagal theory. Bessel van der Kolk talks about this a lot in his book, The Body Keeps the Score. And while there's a lot of holes to punch in some of his theories and him as a person, people say not nice things about him who personally experienced things with him, but his theory is very, very sound, is that it's a neurological process. It's something going on in our nervous system that's preventing us from having executive function. Executive function is the ability to focus, the ability to communicate, the ability to think about the future, to plan, to strategize, right? So when I say I stop worrying about what I was thinking and what I was feeling, I start paying attention to the survival mechanism that was happening in my brain and my body, I turned that down. I turned down the survival response. Now, all those bad thoughts, all those I feel crappy feelings, they disappear, because those aren't the trauma. The trauma is just this ongoing neurological, it's like a panic button being pressed over and over and over. Just turn off the panic button. Like, let's unplug the panic button for a minute. Like turn down the volume on that response. And then you'll see that the thoughts, the feelings, they get quieter and have more capacity to do rule number 3, which is really awesome. This is what I want everyone to get to. Rule number 3 is no dying again, because if you aren't if you're not growing, you're dying. And this is where we actually get to chase our goals, achieve things, be the person we were supposed to be. We actually get to grow past all of those experiences that we had. A part of me got locked away when I was 4 years old. That part of me never got to grow up normally. right?
Exactly.
So once I was able to turn off that survival response and all of the things that my brain learned to do, how I learned to fawn, how I learned to seek out men that had the characteristics of my abuser, because to be
Yes.
safe meant to comply with that person.
Yeah.
Right? And so that trained all of my relationships for a very long time. So I had to turn down that survival response so that all of those habits that I had, all of those survival mechanisms and
Mm-hmm.
reactions and responses, I could turn those off now because they weren't out of survival. I had to reteach myself new ones. Don't get me wrong, learning to have relationships, like real healthy relationships, like
Yeah.
in your late 30s, it's a weird feeling. It's very foreign. But
No, it should not be, because this is the time when you are born. You are 1 year old or 1 day old.
you're right.
Every moment when you're learning, you are at a new beginning.
100%.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
100% true. 100% true. So I think that once you have that understanding that if you can stop worrying about how you're thinking and feeling and understand that what we really should be putting our attention into in the very beginning is what's going on in the brain and the body. Let's do
Yes.
the actions that turn down that survival response, all the thoughts, all the feelings that are bad, the bad ones, the ones that are uncomfortable, the volume, they just turn down. They just sort of magically disappear. It's a very strange feeling.
Uh-huh. And
And
was it something resulting from a medication or your self-talk? What was it?
so interesting. So I've never been on any medication for this. After
Uh-huh.
the kidnapping and attempted murder experience, I did have a therapist,
Mm-hmm.
and she was amazing. And she was the one that really reinforced this idea that I could go to therapy, and that was a safe place for me, and I could
Mm-hmm.
talk if I wanted to. And there were times I didn't want to talk about it. There were times that it
Yeah.
was very uncomfortable to talk about. It was more dysregulating. I would leave therapy after talking about it feeling worse and more just, back into a state of panic and just really,
Mm-hmm.
really uncomfortable in my own body. And I
That's
would
right.
joke, it's a joke now, but my every day after I would leave therapy, I would walk to therapy in my apartment, and in between my therapist's office and my apartment was a pizza place, and I would stop and I would get a large cheese pizza, and I would go home and I would fill the bathtub, and I would put my laptop on a chair next to the bathtub, and I would sit in
Wow.
the bathtub with a pizza
Mm-hmm.
crying. Like
I know.
I would and my cat would come. My cat is very weird. She is we're very bonded over this whole experience, but she would hop in the bathtub with me and sit on my chest because she understood
Wow.
I was upset, and she
Yeah.
she was okay, I'll take a bath with you, right? And so I would sit there with my cat on my chest, bawling my eyes out, eating an entire large cheese pizza every Wednesday. It was not healthy, right? Not healthy, but that was my self-care. That was how I was taking eh, comforting myself after these hard therapy sessions. And I told this to my therapist, and she's like, that's just more coping. Like we need
Yes.
to stop coping. We need to actually start healing. So having that awareness, I went down a rabbit hole. Now, I was very, very lucky to have a therapist who was encouraging me to seek other information. I would go and find articles on neuroscience. And I was always a really nerdy, like
Mm-hmm.
I was in architecture school. I took neuroscience for architects because I wanted to know how our built environment affected our brain. And so it was always a subject I was interested in. And
Okay.
I'd go find these neuroscience articles about what happens in the brain when we experience trauma or a near death experience and all this stuff. And I would bring them to her and she would read them and she would be like, yes, this is good information. Or, hey, why don't you go look at this? And so she really encouraged me to seek healing outside of therapy. And, as a result of that, I realized that you don't heal 1 hour a week in therapy. You heal
Exactly.
in the moment that
Yeah.
challenge a belief or change a behavior, right? And that realization meant that all of these tools that I was learning in therapy, or all of this information I was learning outside of therapy in my own research, and doing this incredible deep dive. Like, this was a 10-month process where I obsessed over it every single day. I didn't realize that that's where I learned, like, wait a minute, it's not my thoughts and feelings that are the problem. I'm having thoughts and feelings because my body's doing something.
Mm-hmm.
And so that shift for me came from, like I said, a therapist who understood that it wasn't her job to heal me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, her job was there to support me while I was healing.
While you were healing.
Yeah.
That's an amazing story of moving from point A to B, something very terrible, to something you want, you actually want, and the others would also want that.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I think, isn't that what everyone's seeking when they say, I just want to heal my trauma? Isn't that what they're seeking? Is they want to know who they're supposed to be, you minus trauma, right? They want to know who they're
yeah,
supposed to be without trauma. And that's how, the only way we can do it is by turning down that survival response in our brain and our body. Because that's,
exactly.
there's a metaphor that I've kind of given. I share this with my clients, um and sometimes, unfortunately, those clients are children. And so this is a
uh,
metaphor that is something that they can understand. So if you're imagine you're driving in your car, you are driving, you're who you are, the conscious mind of you is driving, you're the driver. Your thoughts,
mhm,
your emotions, imagine that they're like a toddler, like a 4 or 5 year old kid in the back seat, strapped into their car seat, safely where they belong, right?
mhm,
And then our survival brain, imagine, is your little pet dog, little puppy, cute little puppy, right? Cute little puppy. And it's just happy, and it's in the back seat, and it's just watching the world go by. Now, imagine while you're driving your car, somebody cuts you off in traffic and you slam on the brakes and everything's really scary, right?
yeah,
Well, all of a sudden, what happens is your cute little puppy dog, your survival brain, goes, wait a minute, I'll save you, right? And it jumps in the way and it takes the wheel and it tries to drive the car for you, right? Now, we know that would
yeah,
never happen. A puppy's not going to come and drive the car. But what happens when that trauma is really big, that goes from a cute little puppy that like barks at leaves and squirrels to a giant Tyrannosaurus Rex. And when the T-Rex, like, oh no, I need to protect my human,
mhm,
it actually kicks you out of the car. And it takes your little toddler, kicks it out of the car with you, and you're left on the side of the road, and your Tyrannosaurus Rex is trying to get away from the threat. So they just take
yeah,
the car and drive off, right?
yeah,
So the Tyrannosaurus Rex is your survival brain, your car
mhm,
is your body, and your thinking mind, the one you that
mhm,
want to be driving the car, and your emotional toddler are left on the side of the road going, what just happened? Now your toddler's
yeah,
screaming and crying. Your only
exactly.
thought is to try to control your toddler, right? Because they're screaming and crying. That's
Yeah,
that's trauma
that's true.
in a little story. And what
Yeah,
we need to do is we need to tell that little T-Rex, okay, calm down. You can be a puppy again. Like, it's okay. Let's calm down. Bring back the car. Can I have my body back, please? Can you please bring
yes.
back the car? Right? So it's a weird analogy. I know it's kind of funny and it gives us this weird picture in our mind, but that's
No, but it's so thoughtful at the same time. It's someone who is just supposed to be there for love and care is taking over whole of your life.
mhm,
That's something not a very good situation.
correct.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it doesn't
so
feel good. It does not
yeah,
feel good at all. But what ends up happening, most people, when trying to heal their trauma, they start with that rule number two, right? They try to fix how they're feeling and what they're thinking first, and that's why it feels like healing is taking too long. Why it feels like,
hmm,
oh, I'm just going to have to live with this for the rest of my life, right? yes, for the rest of your life, you might be a little bit more sensitive to the slamming of a door or the wind blowing, right? You might have a
Yeah.
more sensitive trigger, but that's actually a good thing. And I know it doesn't feel good, right? Like I get that. I experience it too. You know, my boyfriend's he sneezes very loud. He's just one of those people. His sneezes just like rattle the house. So he has learned that he has to warn me before he's about to sneeze because it shakes me, it rattles me. But what's really awesome is now in my business, for example, or you know, I have 3 employees that work for me, and I can tell when something's not right. I can read them so quickly to say, hey, is something wrong? Like, is something off? And they'll be, yes, there's something going on in my life and we're going to miss this deadline. I can see it before it happens. I'm able to predict now all of these things that could potentially blow up my whole business or could potentially, be a threat to my family, right? I can see them. So
Mm-hmm.
my survival brain has become attuned to these things. I've just learned to say, okay, thank you for telling me. Please don't drive my car for me, right? Like, thank you for just letting me know from
Exactly.
the back seat.
That's
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 the
how
key.
it is.
Yep.
And that is how it should be.
Yes.
And it was really, really great talking to you, RC, learning about your traumas and the life that you lived and the way you are living the life now. So that is something completely amazing. And I wish more women and in general, men and women, anybody who's suffering from trauma shall be able to learn something from it. Of course, there's a lot you have said and that everybody can learn from,
Yeah.
but we pick up only those things which we like,
Or
which
that
our
we
brain
need.
likes.
Sometimes it's what we need in the moment.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And so, whatever anybody and everybody can pick up, that would be really great. And that's going to change their life. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much for being here.
Thank you. And if anybody is looking, if I may do a little shameless plug right now, as a result of my whole experience, what I've created is something called Survivor School. And it's so
Yeah.
that people can come, anybody who's experiencing trauma, and it is a space set up for women who've experienced sexual trauma, but we do actually work with any types of trauma. But you can come, and there's tons of free resources on healing, and it's what we call trauma-informed personal development. So if you're trying to get ahead or trying to solve any of the problems in any area of your life, health, wealth, love and relationships, or even just achieving a goal, we have resources that are trauma informed that understand why you aren't reaching your goal and how to get you there. So
And it's survivorschool.com.
survivor-school.com. Yes.
Survivor-school.com.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
great. So if you get a chance, please do visit survivor-school.com, and it's going to benefit you, I'm sure. I did go to that website and I did find a number of things that were really helpful. And thank you so much, RC, and good luck for your
Thank
whole
you so
life.
much. Thank you so much for having me. This has been amazing. I love it.
Okay. All right. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.